Hi everyone, it's Sam from Sitemate. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how to set up a workflow in Dashpivot from scratch and then run through an example. So to start, this is what a workflow can look like inside of Dashpivot. This particular example is an excavation permit, and you'll see that it has 4 columns. We've got permit creator, project manager, active, and then archived. And all that means is if we add a new form, or in this example, it's a permit, that permit is going to sit in this very first column on the left-hand side of the screen, and then as it gets signed off, it's going to move from the first column to the second to the third and so on. And there's a few reasons why the workflow option is really useful for some types of templates. For one, it just standardizes your process and ensures compliance where multiple steps need to be followed and signed off in accordance with that process. The second is that it provides clarity, for the team about what stage a form is at. So in this case, the project manager, there's a single form waiting with the project manager. And if you have a workflow that has maybe a few more steps than this, it can help to identify bottlenecks in your processes. The third is that you can set up workflow notifications. So if we need to notify a particular person, then we can set it up so that particular people who have access to this team can be notified straight away as soon as a form moves into a particular column. I'll show you how to do that in a second. And lastly, the information gets locked off as it's signed off. So if you can imagine that we have a form, and halfway down that form we have a signature. If we sign off that signature, it's going to lock all of the fields that are above it. So that first 50% of the form, all of those text fields, those photo fields, those checkboxes, none of those are going to be able to be edited anymore once it's been signed off. But the lower half of the form, that second 50%, that's still going to be open. So the next person who opens it up, for example, the project manager opens it up, they can go in there and they can fill out those fields, and then once they're happy with it, they might sign it off, and then there might only be 10% of the form left to be filled in, and that's for step 3 until it's finally signed off, and then there's nothing else to fill out. So I'll show you that in just a moment, but the common use cases for permits, but the common use cases for workflows are things like permits, variations, purchase orders, incident and delay tracking, dayworks dockets, just to name a few. But of course, it's very flexible inside of Dashpivot, and you can set it up however you want, as you'll see in just a moment. So in this example video, we're going to set up a simple permit workflow. The first step is to, of course, go to a project team and then navigate to the templates section. Once you're there, you can just click this Add New Template button. And the option that we want to select if we're going to build one from scratch is to create your own template, this one on the right. If we click on that, we can just give it a name. So it might be excavation permit. We might give it a template ID, which might be SM-example-02. And we'll give it a form name. In this case, it's just a permit. You'll notice that we've got this option here in blue to choose between timeline and workflow. And it's a no-brainer, but of course in this case we need to select workflow, otherwise we're not going to have the columns that we need to set up our workflow. So we need to select that option. We're going to click next. It's going to open the template builder, and the very first thing that you should see up the top is the columns. So in this example, by default, you have 3 columns set up. The example that I showed you just before had 4, and we're going to set it up exactly the same as this. So we need to add a new column so that now we have 4, and we're going to give them a name, and the name that we give it is going to correspond to the title at the top of the column. So in this case it might be permit applicant. We might have a project manager to sign it off. We're going to have a column for active, and then we always recommend having a column for archived or closed, just so that it's really clear after the project manager has signed it off whether it's an active permit or it's been closed out and it's now closed or archived, depending on your terminology. So I'm just going to fill out a very basic permit. I'm going to keep it real basic. There's not going to be any specific details. Of course, you'll need to set that up as per the template that you want to set up. The thing that I want to point out here is that you're going to need to set up what we call approval signatures. So drag in a signature field and select approval signature. This is the type of signature which moves the form from one column to the next. So in this case, because we've got 4 columns in our workflow, we're going to need 3 of these approval signatures. So I'm just going to duplicate that twice so that we have 3 of these, and then I'm going to put some of these fields in between those sign-offs so that I can illustrate what the locking of the fields based on the signatures can look like. So we'll get to that in a moment, but if I just save this permit template now, you'll see that we've got our workflow, we've got our 4 columns just like we set up, and no forms have been created just yet. But before we create a permit, to show you a full example, the thing that we're going to want to do in this particular case is set up what we call workflow notifications. So, those are going to avoid you having to email or call or SMS people, print things out, scan them, and repeat that over and over again. Instead, with the workflow notifications, as soon as you sign it and it moves to the next column, it's going to instantly and directly email the correct person. In this case, maybe we want, after the permit applicant has signed it off and it moves to the project manager column, we want to notify the project manager straight away. So we're just going to click on this little icon at the top here, and we can search from all of the people who have access to this team. And the project manager in this case might be Jason, so we're just going to click on Jason's name there, and you'll see that this icon turns blue. And all that that's doing is it's just indicating to us visually that some notifications have been set up, and we can just click it to see who's going to get notified when something moves here. So we're going to go ahead and run through an example now. If I add a new permit, you see that this is the form that we set up a minute ago. You'll see that we've got 3 of these approval signatures, but the second and the third approval signatures aren't actually enabled just yet. And the reason for that is that the first one hasn't been signed off. So I'm going to go through and fill out some of these fields. And if you give me a moment, I'm not actually going to sign it off. I just want to show you, if I save it without signing anything, it's just going to sit in that very first column. So you can see there, it's just been created. Now, if we want to move it from the first column to the second column, we're going to need to sign it off. So we're going to open it up again. We're going to hit sign. You'll notice that it puts the signature on there with the time and date. And we've now got this blue line here that tells us that the fields above this are now locked because there's a signature here. And you can see that I can't click on any of these anymore like I can to the fields that are below the blue line. And that's because these are locked because I've signed it off. And once I hit save, it's going to move it to the second column, and we can be certain that, that Jason has just received an email. This is an example of what it will look like. It's just an email that's very clear. This permit has moved to this column in this team. Here's a button that you can click to open it up. So Jason can go ahead, click on that. It's just going to open it up inside of Dashpivot. He can then scroll down, fill out his section, and then sign off the appropriate signature. And then it will stamp his signature, lock the fields above so that we can't edit this anymore. And then once he saves it, it's going to move to the next column. And in this example, that just means that it's in the active column. So there's a couple things that I want to point out to sort of close out this video. There's 2 things. So the first is that in order to unlock these fields, we need to click this Make Change button, which I'm going to do in just a moment. But before we do that, I just want to point out the version control. So you might have noticed that on the right-hand side of the screen here, we can see that version 1 was created, and then each time we opened up the form and made some changes to each of these fields or signed it off, it's actually up-revving the whole time. So it's going from version 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and so on. And you can see that the current version we're looking at is version 1.6. Now, if I click Make Change, what it's going to do is it's going to up-rev this, but it's going to reset the first number. So I'll show you what I mean. So if I click Make Change, are you sure you want to reset the signatures? Yes, I'm sure. You'll notice that those signatures have gone, and I can now edit these fields that were previously locked. But the version at the top is now version 2. and then if I save it, it's going to be version 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, etc. So I'm going to save that. You can actually see that it's moved from this third column back to the first column. So we're going to have to open it up and sign it off again, and then it's going to notify Jason, and he can sign it off again, and so on and so forth. Now, the last thing that I'd like to mention in this video is that inside of the register view, you can actually see what process step it's up to. So this column here for permit creator, this is actually the column name of the workflow. We just call it a process step. So in this workflow, we have permit creator, project manager, active and closed. Those are all the process steps. And then in the register view, once you've got several permits sitting here, you'll be able to see when you're looking which steps each of those is up to. So if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to us via the live chat on the website or inside of the app. And that's how you can set up your workflows and really streamline and track your forms and your processes using Dashpivot.